We will commence with our committee meeting this morning. It is a Finance Committee meeting to discuss the draft report provided by Fox Point Solutions related to our IT department and software. Joined with my fellow counselors, Counselor Hogan, Nave, Caldwell, Gathers, Paniagua, Monto, and Jones-Rouser. We have our Corporation Counsel and Commissioner of Finance at the table with us as well. And to start off, to open with, I will let everyone know that we had a draft report delivered by Fox Point yesterday afternoon. The Common Council received it, the administration received it, and Corporation Council received it. This is a draft document which is subject to change. In its current form, the document is roughly 25 pages long, plus appendices. In its current form, it contains a couple of major kind of topic areas and content areas. There is a review of currently used software and applications. There are discussions regarding the payroll modernization project, and there are recommendations for future procurement and project accountability and oversight. And so to begin with, I would probably be looking at you, Sue. Just like to acknowledge that we would like to release this document to the public as soon as we can, and what are the steps that need to occur before that can happen?
Thank you. I would like to say that, yes, my office received the report yesterday simultaneously with council. The recommendation from the consultant is that you do not release the report until it is final. I believe, although perhaps Nader or the clerk could confirm, that the consultant is planning to brief the council early next week. And once that happens and they are confident that you have no additional questions or concerns about the report and there's nothing they need to amend, that they will deem it to be final, and then you would be free to release it. And I believe that that would be supported across the board.
What would be the reason for any amendments if this is going to be the document?
I think there are certain redactions in the report, and I think they want to make sure that the council understands why those are not included, why that information was not included in this draft report. And from my own experience, not with this report, but when I'm working on something for a client and it's a draft, if I misunderstood something, if there was a material mistake in an understanding, that would be the opportunity to fix it before it became a final document and went public.
Sue, the State Attorney General's office, they asked me to release the last document we had. And if the State Attorney General's calls one of us counselors and says, we want this, we'll release that to them, of course.
The Attorney General?
Yeah, well, the State Attorney General's investigating this.
I understand. Yeah. I have been in contact with the Attorney General's office with respect to their investigation. And what I would say to them is we will have a final document. My anticipation is next week. I would like to reserve the right to submit it to you at that time.
So we would let you know, but if they ask
Yes.
us, I would feel it would be incumbent on me to release it, to give it to them, right?
Did you say would be or would not be?
I said would be, for me, as a legislator, to give it to them, right?
I think my answer would be the same, that it is not a final report. We should have a final report next week, and I will be glad to share it with you at that time. If the Attorney General felt there was something they needed to know before then I would refer the Attorney General to my office, and I can have those conversations with them in a more privileged manner.
And, there is a lot more acknowledging the payroll modernization component, but there is a lot more to the report. Mike, are you in a place where you can walk us through some of the...
Not really. I got the report yesterday evening. I skimmed through a couple sections, but I have not done a robust review of the report at this time.
Okay. One of the... I think, to me, some of the main findings are they end up offering about $420,000 of potential annual savings related to our software. I'm not sure potentially, someone from API or, can you walk us through how you're going to think about the recommendations, acknowledging again that, we received it all last night, but it talks to the larger concept of duplication of products.
Sure. Yeah, Chief Administrative Officer Corey Dunham. So yeah, I mean, we were, reading through the report. It obviously confirms our understanding that our software applications really match the size of the city that we have, the population that we have, and the operations that we have. So to hear that the amount of software and the type of software that we have and what we spend on software is expected for a city the size of Syracuse. And to find that each department is utilizing the application, I think, is helpful too. So there are not softwares that, the city's spending money on that are not being used. They're all being used, which I think was good to hear. What we can do, the consultant made recommendations. And so our plan would be to look at those recommendations and see whether or not there are potential savings. We welcome this information from the consultant on some enhanced efficiencies. They also acknowledge in the report that it's not a one-for-one. So, one of the ones they recognize with, Rubicon and with Samsara, some of those are, whereas some municipalities might be able to substitute, we'd have to look and see whether or not they meet our operations. But, all in all, we've appreciated the feedback, value it, and we think it's pretty much in line with where we're heading.
And I know through the budget process, we talked about kind of the oversight of IT and
Sure.
API and the potential combination. One of the recommendations in here is to move in the direction of a chief technology officer.
Right.
Can you kind of tell us where we're at with that? And I know the budget process just
Sure.
finished, but
Yeah, as the council members, the mayor had mentioned in his budget proposal that we'd be looking at a reorganization of IT. So it's promising that the report supports the administration's efforts to move towards CTO. I will say, those efforts have been somewhat delayed to understand where we land in terms of the budgeting process. Obviously there were cuts to staffing in IT, which is going to impact our ability to implement that, but we are working through how to make that reorganization change with the amended budget amounts.
other counselors?
So how close are we to actually launching the new payroll system?
So the
Ballpark me, because I don't want to tie you to an exact date.
Sure, yeah, and so, the timekeeping is underway. As I mentioned when we had the committee meeting in April, water is close to launching full-time. DPW and Parks at that time had not started training. They have started training. They're in parallel testing. We just had a meeting last week with staff supervisors from City Hall and One Park Place, so we're getting ready to launch there. So the timekeeping portion, I anticipate being done, I think, at the end of summer, which is pretty consistent with our time frame. We have an RFP on the street right now for an implementation partner for the payroll and the HRIS system, which is the second and third pillar of the overall project. So, we put some expectations in the RFP of, that we'd like to move quickly, but we're really waiting to get those proposals back from those competitive bids in the RFP process for them to provide a timeline of when they think would be realistic for us to launch.
Corey, what's the strategy as far as those deliverables that were mentioned in this report? For Ernst & Young, there was like 22 that either they didn't fulfill their contracted deliverable or not. So where do
Specific to EY?
What's that?
Specific to EY?
Yes.
Yeah, so we are analyzing those invoices now, and the report acknowledges that, that in the interviews we indicated to the consultant that analysis is underway. And once we have a better understanding of looking through those invoices where everything lands, we'd obviously want to communicate that with the council, but the process is still underway right now.
You mean the negotiation to see if we pay them or what?
So just on our side, analyzing the invoices, those that had previously been submitted and any that might be forthcoming.
So with that, who approved the payment of invoices to EY and other vendors despite their incomplete implementation and delayed go-live dates? Who's responsible for that?
I think now it would be Corey, the Chief Administrative Officer.
So at that time, it was past chief administrative officer that did that?
He's the only one who didn't participate in this, right? Mr. Cleaver was the only one who didn't participate in an interview on
I think
this.
two individuals didn't.
Was somebody else too, Mike?
Yep.
So the approval would stop there, wouldn't have to go anywhere else? As far
No,
as
I mean, that's, you know, if it's a, you know, contracts are approved, are signed by the mayor, but in terms of purchase orders and payment of invoices, you know, that could be completed by me.
So didn't you do like an internal memo about this whole situation? That you found your law department didn't find anything wrong with the
We
way
looked at-
this was handled?
We looked at procurement of the services and determined that procurement policy was followed. That was my investigation. That's what I looked into.
But that wasn't shared with us. I don't remember seeing that, right?
Yeah, well, yes. I offered to brief the entire council on the results of my findings when I looked into the procurement issues relative to the payroll modernization project. I'm happy to brief you again.
Oh, you briefed, because it'd be interesting to see what you found as compared to what they found.
Absolutely. Happy to do that. We can set that up as an attorney-client meeting.
And I think it's worth noting that the report confirms that you know, that the procurement procedures were followed.
Absent two people that weren't interviewed.
Right, but they looked at how the way in which the services were procured, and they were done according to procedure.
But the
That's,
person in charge of all that wasn't interviewed, so he isn't part of this report, correct?
I don't understand the
I mean,
question.
Mr. Kaliva.
Right, but when waivers were received, they were granted by the council, and otherwise, there were no procurement procedures that were not followed. It might have been unusual, which I think is how it's characterized, but there were no procurement procedures that were not followed as part of this process.
So I guess I would ask the question, because we do approve the waivers as they come to the council, but why was this waived? Why do we want to go with this waiver?
I mean, I can't attest to the reasoning of the previous CAO, but I mean, you know, it came before the council. I believe that the reasoning was given at that time. And again, any waivers that were requested were approved by the council.
Corey, what's the reasoning for it not to be rolled out? Because in this draft, EY expressed that it should have been ready to roll out, and that the city decision to not move forward was theirs alone. So
Yeah.
what was the reasoning?
I think that's a difference of opinion. I think I don't think, and Mike, you know, I hope that you would agree since you were involved in it ahead of time, but I think that's a difference of opinion. The city did not feel ready, that the project was ready to launch. And so I think there's a difference of opinion in that case, which I think, you know, speaks to the ongoing analysis of the EY relationship.
Which phase was affected that you guys did not feel comfortable moving forward?
So I can't give you, I mean, that analysis, it's ongoing, so I can't give specific, you know, my goal is to get to a place where I can give specific examples to the council of this is what we believe is met, and this is, you know, a better, clearer understanding. I just don't have those answers right now because it's still in process. In part because we were, you know, we knew this audit was underway, and so, you know, why duplicate the actions that the consultant was taking? And so, you know, this will help also inform that investigating analysis of the invoices that's underway. So, you know, this is an important piece to that process.
And just, I mean, for the go-live dates, I believe there were, you know, 3. There was a July 1st, 24 go-live date, and then there was an October 7th, 24 go-live date, and then a January 1st, 2025 go-live date. For the October 7th go-live date, at that time, you know, a lot of our employees still get a paper check. You know, a lot of employees get ACH. At that time, we could not cut paper checks out of the system. So half of our workforce receives paper checks October 7th. I did not feel we were in the position to go live at that date if we could not issue checks to our employees. So that's a little specific to October 7th, but that's one example.
Corey, I have a question.
Yes, Counselor.
And it said city employees we spoke with stated many elements, the payroll modernization project counter delays and cost overruns. Do you have any comments on what their statements were?
So I think we've shared publicly that we share those concerns, which is why the analysis is underway with the team to examine those invoices and determine to a more specific degree the extent of these concerns and how they're reflected in the invoices submitted by EY. So I think we share those concerns, and that's why we're looking into it, which the report acknowledges.
We don't know the amount of the cost overruns and how much money was spent that was not of use.
That's what we're trying to determine. If that is the case, then to what extent that is the case.
Okay.
Corey, let me ask you this question. So at the beginning of the conversation, you mentioned, and it is stated here, that the approximately 100 applications is expected of a city of this size. However, we didn't talk about the rest of that sentence.
Sure.
Which says that they have identified instances where applications used by departments either has unrealized, maybe crossovers potential, or other departments, or an alternative application exists that may serve the main purpose of multiple departments.
Sure.
So is that something where maybe you
Yes,
probably...
that is, and Nico can speak to it, but that is something, that's why we find such value in this report, because, these folks have a certain expertise that they're bringing to the table. So we welcome the opportunity to find out if there are other applications of software that we're using in one department that we could use elsewhere. That's good news for us, that there's...
Because that would be, it's one of the recommendations, it could bring potential
Sure, yeah.
financial benefit.
Similarly, I'm glad to hear that, the departments that have these software applications are using them efficiently, but the opportunity to use them in other departments is welcome news for us, and one that, we're certainly going to take this report back to the team and assess whether or not the suggestions that the consultant makes make sense for us.
So will those changes impact, if there were any changes, impact the modernization of payroll, or is that two independent things?
So yeah, those are, this one is more specific to the different software applications that we have, and not necessarily, the payroll modernization project.
Okay.
And Corey, just to bring me up to speed, because I'm only here a year.
Sure.
The original $2 million, did that come with a match from the city at all? That was all of it?
From the Financial Restructuring Board? Yeah, and Mike, you can speak to this, but the $2 million was given to us, for the intended purpose of modernizing payroll, but there was no required match by the city.
Yeah, no city match for that initial grant.
So the additional 4.2 is all after the fact?
Yeah, and this is in part why it's helpful that the report is in draft form, because there are some, I think we need to take a look at the amount that they put in the report, because I'm not sure that they're accurately capturing the costs. But yes, aside from the $2 million from the FRB, the remaining money has been city money.
So with that, over 7.2 has been spent on the payroll modernization. Can we get a clear list of deliverables that have actually been received versus those that are still pending or disputed?
Sure.
In regards to the project?
Yes.
Have we paid EY everything that they billed us for, or is there outstanding invoices?
There is some, I don't know, Sue, if you want to speak to this, but there is some outstanding, there's more conversation to be had. There's an outstanding invoice that we're looking at right now to determine.
EY claims that they did fulfill all the deliverables too. So has there been any dispute between that or anything that we're going to reconcile all that to?
Right, so that's part of the ongoing analysis, is that, EY makes their sentiments clear in the conversations they had with the consultant, and we're determining on our end and kind of going back through the history of the project and the invoices to analyze them to see if we're on the same page as EY.
So back to the previous question that I asked in regards of like payment and invoices, there were only, at the time, there were only two people that were really overseeing this project or who really had oversight and who really was getting a report to determine whether or not everything was being fulfilled at the due dates and everything like that, besides the delay form.
I mean, I think there is a difference between who was signing the bills and who was, overseeing the project. It's not as, there was a team working on the project, but ultimately, I would imagine, not having seen them myself, but we could certainly find out, I would imagine that the CAO at the time was the one signing the invoices. Is that accurate, Mike?
Yes.
Yeah.
Corey, any time during this whole process, were there written reports given by Mr. Cleva to the mayor regarding how the progress was going, or was this all verbal?
I can't speak to that because I wouldn't have been, I can certainly find out, but I wouldn't have been involved in those conversations or received those reports because I wasn't directly involved in the project at the
This was a long
time.
path, obviously.
Correct.
And I think, I imagine there might have been updates, written updates.
I can certainly find out. I mean, I know
Maybe
having.
update's the wrong word, but,
I mean, having been, in meetings with senior staff and the mayor, I know that, there were regular updates given on the project, whether or not they were written and the extent of the conversation between the mayor and Mr. Cleva, I can certainly determine. But I wouldn't have been privy to those conversations because I wasn't involved in the project at the time.
would they be foilable? Those, I'm just wondering, no? So the reason we're not allowed to release this, you're asking us not to release this, for what specific reason?
My advice.
I'm talking as a city councilor.
Understood.
Right.
Exactly. It's only my advice. When you received the report, the consultant that was hired requested that it not be shared publicly until they had an opportunity to brief the council and put it in final form. So my advice is follow your consultant's advice, but that is only my advice. You are a body free to do what you'd like. I cannot force anybody to take my legal advice despite my best efforts.
So while
And I
we're
can
on-
say from the administration standpoint, we're comfortable releasing the report.
While we're on that road, in the last month or so, we've been accused quite ridiculously of having dark of night, in the dark of night secret meetings as a body. What should we be doing with this draft? Should we be discussing this as a council?
Amongst yourselves? Certainly. I
Okay.
mean,
Okay,
I think you should be.
okay.
But only at midnight.
Only dark of night, apparently, but I just want to make sure that that's clear with the public, that we're not having secretive meetings and it's okay for us to talk about this.
I think it is a draft report that you can be discussing, and you should be discussing if you feel comfortable with your consultant. If you would like to have a privileged meeting with my office, I am more than happy to set that up, and we can discuss it at that time. I am not the subject matter expert on the contents of that report, but I'm certainly happy to discuss with you my legal advice with respect to it.
And we're ready when the council is. The administration's ready to release it.
So with this project, in the future, what steps have been taken to ensure future large-scale technology projects and that are subject to full RFP processes, transparency, and documentation? Have we moved forward to do that? Are we going to,
So I
anything
think
moving
that's,
forward?
I think that's reflected in the fact that, so one, none of the consultants that were working on the project prior to my involvement are with the project anymore. So those engagements ended at the end of January.
Okay.
As we seek to implement and move to the next phase of the project, we have issued an RFP. And I think I sent the council an email last week notifying you that we'd issue the RFP. So it will be competitively bid. Members of the council will be on the committee to select that vendor. So I mean, that will come before the council to approve the contract with that vendor. So that will be a competitive, open, transparent process. So I think that's how we intend to move forward.
So with the past conversation about as far as releasing it,
Releasing this report?
yes.
Okay.
Are you all waiting for us to release it, or is the administration going to release it, or who's going to release what?
I mean, we can talk about the logistics of how it's released. I just wanted to make it clear that, we're ready when the council is. So we're comfortable releasing the report. When the council says that they're comfortable, we can figure out the logistics of releasing it. But I just wanted to make that.
Corey, if by chance, whether it's the Office of State Attorney General or the Office of State Controller want to look at this now,
Sure.
Do you have any objections?
No,
No?
I mean,
No one?
we
Okay.
welcome it. We've got,
Okay.
Counselor Hogan, can I go back to a question you asked me about foiling? I just want to clarify. Anybody can foil anything. The issue becomes whether or not, one, the records exist, and assuming the records exist, upon review, are there redactions or withholdings that would be appropriate under FOIL? I am not aware of any responsive documents to the discussion you were having about Mr. Kaliva and the mayor. I wouldn't know that. Assuming those documents existed, my office would review them under the context of FOIL to determine what can and cannot legally be released. So I just wanted to clarify that. Anybody can FOIL anything.
That's a very good clarification. Thank you.
Thank you.
Corporation Counsel.
And we haven't seen the redactions either, so we don't know what has been redacted.
I believe that's what the briefing would.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
So given that the RFP process would not be waived, we would have to follow the proper procurement procedures with the new project.
correct. I mean, which was done with the payroll project. So, you have two options. You can either competitively bid a service or come to the council to request a waiver of competitive bid. That was done in all situations. Either something was competitively bid or they came, Frank, I believe at the time, came to the council and asked for a waiver of competitive bids. So, that is an option, and that's what was exercised and came before the council and was approved by council. But, aside from waiving competitive bid, then you competitively bid it, which is what we're doing. We've issued the RFP. We're getting questions from vendors now. We anticipate the process probably to close sometime in early July. And again, the council members will be on that committee to help us vet the proposals, and then we'll come to the council to say, we've competitively waived this. This is who the committee selected, and this is who we think is the best fit for the city, and we want to enter into a contract with them.
And Corey, even with the waiver of competitive bid, that was, in fact, with Cherry Road, correct?
Mike, do you know?
No, Cherry Road was an RFP. So,
That was an
so
RFP.
most of the FRB grant money went to Cherry Road as a result of that RFP to implement timekeeping.
Okay.
Corey
So
and
the
Sue.
RFP, I'm
Go
sorry,
ahead.
so the RFP was with Ernest & Young?
So so it's my understanding there was an RFP that was issued. Mike, correct me if I'm wrong.
Waiver of competitive bid.
Chair,
I'm
yes,
sorry.
yes, the waiver of competitive bid that's what was brought before the council for EY.
Which came first?
So the RFP, Mike, right, the RFP was issued, Cherry Road was awarded that RFP. EY had also submitted a proposal at that time. Once the engagement with Cherry Road ended, then they came before the council for a waiver of competitive bid to enter into an agreement with EY.
That's correct.
Okay.
In the future, would the administration agree with creating a third-party oversight, including the council and an outside IT agency to oversee everything that we're doing to make sure that we're actually doing things efficiently?
So outside third party, kind of as a subject matter expert for us to refer to?
With including the council?
I think we're open to it. I mean, I don't, I think it would be someone that would, advise both the administration and the council. But, this recommendation being fresh off the press, that's my immediate reaction, is that I think we're open to that.
I have a question.
Yes.
When a person leaves government,
Yes.
how long does it take for them to lose access to emails and any other important departments where they can still interact? How long does it take for, once they're terminated or they leave, that they have no access whatsoever?
So the policy is for it to happen immediately.
It's immediately. And so it's not done verbally, oh, by the way, do that. We do verify and double check
I mean,
through IT.
Yeah, I mean, it's a process with HR and IT, but if I said, or if the mayor said, your last day is tomorrow, then, we would inform HR and IT that after 5 o'clock tomorrow, I should not have access to my email, to any of my files, take my card away, take all my access away. So the policy is for it to be happening,
All right,
whether you're terminated or you're resigning, that it happens on your last day and you lose access once you're no longer a city
okay,
employee.
So there was no delay when Mr. Rudd and Mr. Cleaver left, right? It was cut off immediately, or was there a few extra days that they still had access?
To my knowledge, access was terminated immediately for, upon their last day.
Okay.
Yep. And I think that one of the things the report points out is that in terms of, Microsoft 365, that's when you can shut off access. But there were the software as service contracts where there can be extended access to non-employees after a period of time.
Okay.
But kind of keeping in this vein, the report also talks about outdated and potentially insecure software.
Sure.
Do we have a process and a timeline for potentially addressing those concerns?
So, as soon as possible, given that there are cybersecurity concerns. So now, to be able to share, once we know, obviously, those are not listed in this report because that pauses put a security concern out there. But once we have the information of what those applications are, immediate meeting with API, with digital services, with IT to resolve those issues as soon as possible.
Do we currently have a security audit, like annually? How often do we do an audit of the security?
So we do, yes, we do have systems in place to detect a potential cyberware attack. And so there's also a training that IT sends out every year for everyone to engage in it so that you can identify phishing emails and et cetera. So, we do have a pretty comprehensive cybersecurity infrastructure working in the background in IT.
I heard we can get that for cheaper.
What's that? And maybe we can, and again, that's a welcome recommendation. Maybe there are options out there that other cities are using, which I think is why, this report is of such value to us.
Yeah, because even in the executive summary, the last paragraph says the structure of IT and API does not necessarily lend itself to the type of review recommended above. Based on this and the lack of the coherent long-term strategy between IT and the analytics, performance, and innovation department, we recommend the city adjust the management structure of both departments by adding the role of Chief Technology Officer. Both IT and API will report to this position, and the CTO would act as both gatekeeper for the future application purchases and maintain a strategic IT plan that aligns with the priorities of the administration, IT, and API. Additionally, this individual will report periodically to the Common Council to ensure the councilors are given current understanding of both the strategic plan and the status of the current IT API projects. It is likely that these recommendations, if implemented, would help mitigate potential cost overruns, prevent lengthening the time of projects, and also limit change in scope once the project is initiated. And I think that was something that was lacked in the beginning with this, and that is, for me, a great recommendation, I feel.
Yeah. And again, the mayor mentioned in his budget proposal that part of the budget was proposed reorganization of IT with a CTO, which is supported by what's in this report. And again, we were waiting until the dust settled with the budget to determine whether or not that's still possible, and we think we can still move forward with that reorganization.
So then that would lead into my next question as to why did it take until 2025, 2026 budget to include a CTO position despite the years of the system's redundancies and escalating costs?
I think part of it was there was an intention to create a CTO in the last budget, and the funding was cut as part of the budget process with the council. And so, we faced staffing cuts through the council's budget amendments this year, but we're determined to make it work with the money that we have. And I would be happy, to brief the council on what we think the proposed structure would look like. I'd welcome the feedback on what we think might make sense.
Do we currently conduct annual software security audits that are reviewed independently, or?
Yes, there's always more that we can do with cybersecurity, but we do have protections in place in terms of cybersecurity. We do have, notifications in place that notifies IT, hey, we think something might be going on here, and IT does have the ability to react to that, and that's why, it's important that we have city staff that are able to do that, and then also professional services to bring in some outside experts to help us as well. Yeah, sure. Go ahead, Nico.
Good morning, councilors. Nicolas Diaz, Chief Innovation and Data Officer with the API team. I just wanted to talk a little bit about the last point on cybersecurity, and I don't mean to speak for the IT department, but there is coordination that happens between API and IT, so I can talk a little bit about our cybersecurity efforts because IT is making a lot of progress on a constant basis with very limited resources here. And when we think about security, we're thinking about hardware, and we're thinking about in terms of software. When it comes to hardware, we are leveraging Microsoft Intune platform, which basically creates a link between our Microsoft environment and every single computer. And Shelly, if she's around, can talk a lot more about the details here. So that's from the hardware side. So what we're looking at is how many of our systems are actually monitored through this tool called Intune. When it comes to software, Councilor mentioned access to software, and that's a great point, like making sure that no one has access for longer than they need to. And the tool that we're using for that is a Microsoft solution called Single Sign-On, which means that you can only access the digital tool with your Microsoft access. And because that's what we remove when we remove someone from their email, then that just automatically cuts access to anything that they would have as part of their employee.
And
So
Nico, I don't want to be rude to stop you, but
I was just.
I think one of the things that I'm concerned about right now is that we go down this road where we're just blasting out what our insecurities are with the city. And I think the redactions that we haven't seen, we probably need to be briefed before we ask any more questions about how secure we are or not. So I'm not comfortable having this conversation and open about our security right now. I just think it's probably a bad idea. But that's me. The rest of my colleagues can feel differently, but I certainly don't want to put the city at risk. Our job sitting here at this table is to keep the city safe.
Understood and agreed. My only recommendation to council would be to ask how many of our applications are in single sign-on. I think that would be a smart question.
Thank you.
Mr. Diaz, so who did you deal with primarily? EY?
For the payroll project,
Yeah.
I was not the main point of contact with EY
Who
at the
was
time.
Frank?
Frank was the main point of
Okay.
contact with EY.
What about the pass-through? What about AIT? I think that's the name of the company.
I did not have any official communication with that
So it was
company.
all Mr. Cleva then?
I don't know if it was only Frank, but I did not have any contact with them.
Well, I mean, who was the main city contact?
It was primarily the former chief administrative
Okay.
officer.
Michael, maybe you can answer. So when Mr. Cleaver left his position, did he leave all his personal, did he leave all of his city papers, documents? Did he take it with him, or was it left here?
So, I mean, I can tell you what we do have access to, which is, we have access to his computer files, we have access to his emails. So, I mean, I can speak to.
Okay, so he won't be going to the media someday and say, oh, look, all these documents, what I have.
I can't say that for sure.
Okay, but he might have some private documents.
I honestly, I just don't know.
Okay.
All right. So I think that this is a good starting point for a conversation that will continue. And Corey, thank you for
Thank you,
being up
counselors.
at the podium
Appreciate
today.
it.
Thank you.
Sue and Mike, appreciate it. And Sue will coordinate with your office and make sure that
Perfect.
we can move forward and have the conversations that we need to have, and then make sure we can get the document out to the public.
Thank you.
All right. So with that, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.